G'day guys, JB here, back with another divisional preview for the 2019-2020 season. This time the South East Division, the final division of the Eastern Conference. We've done the Atlantic, we've done the Central, now time for the South East Division. We'll be covering Orlando, Miami, Charlotte, Washington and Atlanta in this one. So sit back and enjoy for the next 10-15 minutes. We get a bit of a preview of what is to come. First team we'll start with is the Orlando Magic. The Magic making a playoff run this year, signing some decent contracts in the off-season as well. I think the best five they can put on the floor is DJ Augustine, Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon, Jonathan Isaac, and Nikola Vucevic. Again, Vucevic signing a pretty decent contract, and he deserved it too with an all-star appearance and only the third player in Orlando history, 20-point, 10-rebound season. Aaron Gordon, capable athlete as we know and player. I think Fournier will just get the role ahead of Ross in the starting guard position there in the 2 spot. Augustin to come in as the point. Jonathan Isaac probably going to play the 4 there. Off the bench, Terrence Ross, Al-Farouq Aminu, Markel Fultz, Mo Bamba, Wesley Awundu, Michael Carter-Williams as well. So, I mean, that's a side there that has, a reasonable 10-man rotation, providing that Fultz is healthy. Again, we can see what goes on there. Kem Birch, Melvin Frazier, Vic Law, Daquan Jeffries, and Asanhi Gravett rounding out that roster. And again, potentially sitting with a 10-player rotation there for a lot of the season, which would be a real positive there for Orlando. But I feel they're just lacking that one extra star and that one capable player. So to me, that would mean, they've probably just got too many role players. Now, if all of those role players can play their role perfectly, then you've got a Clippers situation from last year where you push to a 6th seed, you outdo the competition compared to how you thought you were going to do. Push into the playoffs, you get a 6-game series against the team that eventually went down in the finals, the Golden State Warriors, the defending 2-time champs. So again, I don't think there's a reason why Orlando should struggle with this roster. The only thing I feel they have is just too many role players. Again, 10-man rotation, but it'd be nice to have a bit of a star attraction there. Vucevic is going to want to step up a bit this season. Aaron Gordon's going to want to step up as well. And again, it's going to be interesting to see how Markel Fultz goes. He's had a couple of interesting seasons in Philadelphia, obviously with Orlando now. So he's going to want to come in and prove and try and get into that starting spot. I think he'll come off the bench at the moment, but we'll see how that goes. And move on to Miami. I mean, by the way, just quickly, I think Orlando make the playoffs. I don't think that's an issue. Moving on to Miami. Now, a lot of people are going to sit there and go, well, I'm not too sure what's going to go on here with Miami. Talks that Chris Paul is going to be eventually traded into their squad. Hasn't happened at the time of recording this video. If anything changes, again, there'll be an amendment to it. But Miami with a pretty decent squad as well. They picked up Jimmy Butler in the offseason, got rid of Hassan Whiteside's contract, moved him on to Portland. So it's going to be interesting to see how they run as a squad. I think the best 5 they can put on the floor, Goran Dragic, Jimmy Butler, Justice Winslow, Kelly Olynyk, and Bam Adebayo. It's going to be interesting to see how they form. Adebayo, a very exciting young prospect there as a big athletic, can block shots, gets after it. Justice Winslow coming into his own a little bit, needs to get ready to take that extra step if Miami are going to be a serious player. Everyone knows Jimmy Butler's ability. It's going to be a question around him, though, no doubt. Goran Dragic, proven guard from Europe, can do it. And Kelly Olynyk, probably not the best choice at the 4, but tends to stretch it a bit. Coming off the bench, Dion Waiters, James Johnson, Derek Jones Jr., Miles Leonard, so again a decent 9-man rotation there. Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, KZ Okpala, Kendrick Nunn, Jeremiah Martin, Kyle Alexander, and Chris Silver rounding out the roster spot there for Miami. I think the big question there is going to be the drama that can be avoided around Jimmy Butler. It seems everywhere he goes there seems to be some chemistry issues or some sort of personnel issue. Only a few seasons ago, Rajon Rondo and Dwayne Wade more than happily handed over the reins to Jimmy Butler on that Chicago team. They went in and they knew it was Jimmy's team. He then moves on to the Timberwolves, not necessarily the biggest fans of Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns, so he had his issues there. Just wanted them to get after it a bit more. Nothing came of that. And then went to Philadelphia, got a 4 all-star lineup there with Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, and unfortunately couldn't get the job done, asking a lot of questions about the competitiveness of some of those players as well. Butler being the absolute standout in this squad now, particularly without a Chris Paul. It's going to be interesting to see whether Miami want to pick up what is essentially a bad contract to finish Chris Paul's career with his output at the moment. But Butler is the man there. Another big question there for Miami is, can Dion Waiters come back and get into some form? Waiters only a couple of seasons ago, having a pretty good run, maybe a few years ago now, but able to put in a run, able to put in some numbers, and be a decent contributor. This was a guy that, was trying to get to an all-star level there Had a bit of up and down form for most of his career, but again, how he comes back and how he fits in with a Butler is going to be crucial as well. As I mentioned just quickly there, a 9-man rotation, I don't think that's going to be an issue at all for Miami. Again, it's going to be a matter of how Jimmy Butler fits around his team, whether they bring Chris Paul in, how much that changed the roster as well. We can look at that as it happens. And again, Dion Waiters, I feel, is going to need to take a step. As I mentioned, Justice Winslow, he's going to slowly progress. Dragic doesn't have too long left in the tooth, but certainly still a capable starting point. Winslow wanting to get into it, as I mentioned. And Olynyk, again, coming out of Boston and sort of bouncing around a little bit here. His form isn't the greatest, but again, he's a stretch 4, can rebound a little bit, not too much considering his height. Rebound a little bit, stretch the floor, all that sort of stuff. James Johnson's been a pretty good player for the Heat for the last couple of years as well, so be interesting to see how they go as well. Moving on to Charlotte, and Charlotte's just slowly becoming a burning heap at the moment. Considering they've got Michael Jordan, the front office, you'd think they'd be a bit more competitive, but Jordan's track history off the floor is nothing compared to what he actually did on the floor as a player. If he was as good a GM as he was as a player, we'd be sitting here talking about how great Charlotte has been as a franchise and how many championships they've won under his reign. Nonetheless, it hasn't been the case. Wouldn't sign Kemba Walker in the off-season, so they picked up Terry Rozier instead. Yeah, seemed like a fair swap to me. Starting 5 for me out of Charlotte's going to be Rozier, as I mentioned. Malik Monk, Nick Batum, Marvin Williams, and Cody Zeller. So not a lot going on there. Miles Bridges and Willie Hernan Gomez coming into that team as well. So a consistent and reasonable 7-man rotation. You then have your Dwayne Bacon, your Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Bismarck Biyombo, Devontae Graham, PJ Washington, Cody Martin, Caleb Martin, and Joe Shealy to round out that roster there. And again, probably the most underwhelming roster when you really look at it top to bottom in the league. There's not a lot to get excited about. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, I think we can all agree, has done nothing outside of his first 2 to 3 years in the league. Bismarck Biyombo really used to be able to be a bit more of a shot block and a bit more of a presence. Doesn't do much there anymore. Dwayne Bacon, capable player when he wants to be, but isn't consistent enough. Hernan Gomez and Bridges slowly working amongst the league. Bridges not doing too bad. But again, when your star player essentially are guys that teams didn't want, I mean, Nick Batum was a third option at one point in Portland, not doing anything there. Marvin Williams slowly trying to get into his groove, wasn't too bad for Charlotte last year as well. But Rozier signed a fat contract, a bad contract that, you know, they really should have just tried to pay Kemba and get another person around him. Again, there's really not much I can say about Charlotte. I don't see them making the playoffs, unlike Miami and Orlando, who I definitely think will make the playoffs. But Charlotte, yeah, I don't really see them going anywhere. And as I said, one of the most underwhelming rosters top to bottom in the league. As I said, bunch of rejects and guys who are just sort of falling flat on a lot of their careers. So I wouldn't really be expecting anything out of Charlotte at the moment. And if this roster isn't blown up, most of this roster isn't blown up by this off-season or next, I would be shocked. Moving on to Washington now. And Washington's a bit of a 50-50 for me. Could make playoffs, might not make playoffs. The big factor there is the fact that John Wall is going to be out again for another 12 months with injury, so unfortunately for him. But it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with that contract. Again, they've just cleared Otto Porter out, and there's been plenty of contention that John Wall is the chemistry killer amongst this team. Anyway, he's going to be out, and as we go through, I think the best 5 that Washington's going to be able to start with is Isaiah Thomas, Bradley Beal, CJ Miles, Davis Bertans, and Thomas Bryant, if I'm going to be honest. Again, pretty guard heavy, okay there at the 3 as well, but once you come outside of that, there's not much more going on in that squad. Ish Smith, Jordan McRae, Troy Brown, Jamario Jones, Mo Wagner, Ian Mahimi, Isaac Bonga, Rui Hashimura, Admiral Schofield, Justin Robinson rounding out that lineup. Again, John Wall on the injury list, you won't see much of him. Again, no John Wall and a guard heavy starting 5, and relying on that perimeter. Particularly at Isaiah Thomas at 5'9", Bradley Beal 25, 5 and 5, but again, his opposite partner isn't the most traditional, and he's had a massive 2 years of injuries and niggles and upsets and delistings and trades and stuff like that. So to say that Isaiah Thomas is in a great headspace would be certainly not the truth, in my opinion. I think he's got a lot of fire in the backside and fire in the belly to really come out and perform. Whether he does is another question. Again, no John Wall and the guard-heavy starting 5 is essentially going to be their issue. They could make the playoffs. If they do make, again, they're going to scrape the 7th or 8th seed at best. If they miss, I'm not going to be shocked. If they make it, they'll only be a low seed. But I really don't see much coming out of Washington here. As I mentioned, 1 through 3, they're okay. Bradley Beal, an all-star player. Isaiah Thomas, one of the 5, was in the top 5 MVP voting only a few seasons ago. But again, he's got to get back to that level. How long that takes, we don't know. A couple of promises there. Bertans and Bryant wanting to work. Mo Wagner wanting to work. But I really don't see much more outside of this lineup for Washington. And again, once more, no John Wall, guard heavy starting 5, proving to be an issue with a lack of depth, essentially, which is going to see them maybe run 7 deep, maybe run 8 deep at best, but not to an elite level, and certainly not with the amount of role players that, say, Orlando have, who have a couple of okay players, in your Isaiah Thomas, Bradley Ball, sort of in that category there. But, their role players are much better than the role players that Washington have. Finally, we have Atlanta. And again, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And to me, they are definitely the youngest, but potentially the most exciting to watch in the whole division. I think the best 5 they're going to get out of this squad is Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, Jabari Parker, John Collins, and Alex Len. Collins, Parker, and Young, big or good athletes, exciting athletes. The question on the injuries with Parker certainly could develop a little bit more in the season. We'll see how that goes. And again, Alex Len starting at the 5 spot there. From there, Alan Crabb and Evan Turner are going to be their biggest players off the bench, running 7 deep. On that squad, they also have DeAndre Bembry, Chandler Parsons, who we'll get into in a little bit, Damian Jones, DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish, Bruno Fernando, and Ray Spalding. As I mentioned, one of the youngest the youngest and certainly, in my opinion, probably going to be the most exciting in the division, and I don't see them making the playoffs. But there's a lot of development coming through. John Collins is a young gun, a really good player, and he's going to want to really start pushing towards that all-star category in the next couple of seasons. Been very high on him since his rookie season, so it's going to be interesting to see how he goes. And there's no reason he can't be a 17 and 10 and 18 and 10 guy this year. He's got Trae Young, a capable passer. Jabari Parker, again, he's going to be around that 17, 18 point per game mark, you'd have to think, depending on how the injuries go. So we'll see how they go there. Evan Turner, I wouldn't be shocked to see him potentially getting over Herter to get onto the bench. But again, how they want to run it height-wise, size-wise, all these different matchups, I think Turner would be best suited coming off the bench. DeAndre Bembry, not a bad player either, but again, he's looking to take that next step. The big question here is what happens with Chandler Parsons, whether he gets bought out, whether he remains on the squad, what happens there. Again, Parsons signed a fat contract coming out of Houston. Houston was removed essentially. He was removed from Houston only a few seasons back. Had been on the side along with the James Harden and the Jeremy Lin and sort of the Dwight Howard period there. Moved on to Dallas and bounced around a little bit and really hasn't done anything since. I was shocked when they got rid of him. I believe he was sort of part of the Chris Paul deal as well, somewhere along those lines. But again, a player who, when he was on the floor, was a capable scorer, a capable perimeter defender, sort of not really a 3-and-D guy. He's good for 15 points a game, but a decent perimeter defender and someone that could help you out in that department. How he helps out Atlanta, I'm not too sure. Whether he gets on the squad, I'm not too sure. So it's going to be a matter of waiting and seeing there. But again, as far as Atlanta are concerned, they're definitely the youngest of the division, but to me, they're going to be the most exciting. A lot of upside with Trae Young and John Collins. I even think they might even finish ahead of Charlotte, just with the way they can be. There's, again, when you look at Atlanta and you see the fact that, okay, Trae Young's exciting, and Jabari Parker, when he's fit, is exciting. Evan Turner's a good ball player. John Collins, as we mentioned, 15, 16 points, 10 rebounds a game, capable as well. I don't think they make the playoffs, and I do actually think Washington will finish ahead of them. But I think Atlanta are by no means going to be walkovers in this division. Young and exciting, going to have to keep an eye on them. And certainly a team to watch. Trae Young drawing plenty of attention last year. So we'll see what goes on from there. Anyway, guys, that's been my preview of the Southeast Division for the 2019-2020 NBA season. That concludes my divisional breakdowns for the Eastern Conference. So hopefully you guys can sort of get a grasp and a concept of what's going on for me in the East. Just to recap this one, playoff teams coming out of the Southeast Division for me will be the Orlando Magic and Miami Heat. My 50-50 squad there would be Washington, could sneak into the lower half of the East. If not, they will miss. And I certainly see Atlanta and Charlotte missing, but I do see Atlanta having way more upside at this point than Charlotte. So it'll be interesting to see. Atlanta capable of probably scoring a reasonable free agent as well to want to go and play with a Trae Young and a John Collins, depending on what sort of contracts they're going to be looking at there. Anyway, guys, that's been me, JB. Thank you very much for tuning in once again to another divisional preview for the 2019-2020 season. Like the Facebook page, leave a comment, share the video. Love to get some traffic about the page as well. Just love covering the game. Bit of fun as always. Hit me up on Twitter, Justin_G_Bryan. Hit me up on YouTube, Justin Bryan. And yeah, just basically covering the league as it goes. Getting ready to head into the Western divisions now. And we'll see what that brings about as well. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm out.